All right, everyone, we've got a lot to cover today, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So I want to welcome you to our first Algolia live coding session of 2023. For those that have attended in the past, you're probably familiar. If not, this is a live session that we aspirationally try and do once a month, where we bring in engineers and we talk a little bit about sort of things that they've implemented with Algolia, things across the ecosystem. Today, in particular, we have our friends from FontAwesome here, and the topic is finding thousands of icons with Vue.js and Instantsearch.js. So we have today myself. I'm Chuck Meyer, if you don't know me. And yes, my hair has gotten significantly shorter since last year. But I'm a senior developer advocate over here at Algolia, and I host a lot of these sessions. And today I'm joined by Rob Madole, who's the principal software engineer at FontAwesome, and also Emanuel, who is a senior software engineer at FontAwesome. For those that don't know Algolia, we provide a set of hosted APIs that allow developers to build search, recommendation, discovery experiences into your web applications and your mobile applications easily. And that's actually what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about FontAwesome's journey to add search to their site. But first, Rob, do you want to tell us a little bit more about FontAwesome? I know I love you guys. I've used your icons in several projects across the years.
Of course, yeah. So at FontAwesome, we have a pretty simple mission. We want to make icons for people, and we have at this point, we've been around for a while. We have thousands of icons, but we want to make that as easy as possible to get on your website or integrate into your product. Our kind of underlying goal is everybody uses icons on their site. Let's make that a quick thing. Let's get them on there so you can go do something else, because there's other things, but fun things to work on.
Oh, so great. I was building an autocomplete experience for a video search, and I was like, I want to put a little clock next to the timing. It was so great to just be able to jump in, grab that, put it in, and it just really makes your UI pop when you have those icons in there. So I think it's great.
It does. It does. Yeah. As developers, we don't typically have a lot of design experience, and that is a very quick way to kind of make it look more professional really quickly.
Right on. Awesome. I'm going to say awesome a lot. I know. I don't know if you all end up doing that a lot, but I feel like I end up saying awesome all the time when I'm talking about you guys. So, well, if it's cool with you, can we dig right into the code? Is there anything else we want to talk about beforehand?
No, I mean, I don't think so. We can talk about some of the FontAwesome stuff, but I think everybody's here for the code. So I will kind of little intro here, kind of where we were at before we dove into this. So FontAwesome, we had version 5. We had a really successful Kickstarter, and we wrote version 5, and we used Algolia. We've actually used Algolia now for coming up on a decade, which seems crazy, but it's been that long. And we wrote our own search. So we're using Vue on the front end, and we're making calls from the front end to Algolia's APIs. So we've got an index there with all of our icons in there. And the version 5 of it was a little bit janky. Since we wrote our own, there was just some things that we didn't get quite right. At one point, I had the bright idea of having an infinite scroll, which at this point, I regret deeply. It was horrible, especially on mobile. So we're at this point. Okay, now we're going to release version 6 of FontAwesome, and part of that is we were doing some new, we call them families, but it's a completely new design of FontAwesome, kind of a new look. We call it sharp. As you might imagine, all the icons are sharp edged. So we were going to redesign search because we needed new search capabilities. So that's when we came up, started to kind of do our own thing again, but then we ran into some problems, and we were like, okay, wait, Algolia. Somebody found, I don't know if it was Ed or somebody else, but they found out that you guys actually have Vue components that you support that integrate in with Instantsearch.js. So we were able to take our entire search experience, and Ed pretty much by himself rewrote the whole thing in a kind of a 6-week period. And so that's kind of where we're at. Is we've got we're doing 40 million searches per month. we've got 20,000 records in our main index. And now let's see what some code looks like.
That sounds awesome. Now, there's a couple things in there. First of all, it looks like someone is sharing. Is that me? Let's see.
I think I turned on my screen sharing.
Oh, okay, Ed. Yeah, if you want to pop up, maybe pop up the FontAwesome site there while we're talking.
Yeah.
Before we jump in. Cool. Yeah, just like let's look at what we're talking about because you have a great UI. Like I love the categorization. I love some of the different things you're doing there. But before we kind of jump into FontAwesome itself, like I'm a little fascinated too by the Vue side of things, right? I know we're going to be talking a lot about Vue today. Um, Frankly, a lot of the folks that I sort of engage with historically were sort of in that React space. But I've seen just kind of an avalanche of Vue coming out of the woodwork the last year. Some of it has to do with like one of our ambassadors, Jacob Andriski, did a really nice, and I'm sorry if I butchered your last name, Jacob, but did a really nice sort of Nuxt 3 integration. But you're pure Vue. And I've played with Vue a little bit, and I'm intrigued by sort of the function forward nature of it. Like I love that as a functional programmer myself. Um, I'm a little intimidated by the sort of encapsulation, right? The fact that like kind of you've got the HTML and the CSS and the JavaScript all in the same components. I find that very intriguing. It's hard to wrap my head around. Can you just speak for a minute about sort of how you came to Vue and what you love about sort of working within the Vue environment?
Yeah, absolutely. We had some previous projects that we had used React on. And
Mhm.
one of the things that really appealed to us, because we're a company, we have our designers are they can get into the components and they're enabled to be able to edit stuff. And our designers, they're not just visual designers, they don't just stick with CSS and markup. They can actually get in those components. And
Mm.
that's what really appealed to us is like React was not very accessible to the designers. It's just
Mm.
the layers on top of it, understanding how that stuff works. Had struggled with that a lot. When we got to Vue, the magic was that all of that stuff was in a single file. So you could see how the things integrated together and the way that you separate the template, which ends up being at the top of the file. And we'll look at some examples. And then with the scripting part, the JavaScript part at the bottom, that that really helped us a lot with just being able to work together as a design development team.
That makes sense. Cool. Cool. And my colleague Julie, who's in the chat right now, doing a great job, is reminding folks that if you do have any questions for us, this is live. There's a QA tab within the meeting that you can click over to and feel free to ask any questions and we can answer them as we can as we go. We'll also try and keep a little space at the end for some Q&A too. But I know, again, we've got a lot to cover. So I'll let you all dig into sort of the process that you went through as you did this evolution and how you sort of pivoted over to instant search and started incorporating it.
Very
Okay.
good. Yeah, I'll let Ed take over from here.
Okay. So I kind of want to start with showing off some of our data that's here inside of Algolia. And so we did a couple of things. We wanted to be able to identify icons with the object ID. So we've added in here the ID starts with an I, and then we have the style plus the icon's unique identifier.
Mm.
Well, it's kind of unique identifier, right? Because we have multiple styles. So there's another record in here that is regular, house, etc. And then we also added a number of other fields on here. Keep track of the family. I believe the style, styles down here, and all of the other useful pieces of information about it that we might want to sort on or be able to narrow down the searches.
Got it. So kind of within your space, the uniqueness is that tuple of the class of icon plus the description of the icon itself. The eye on the front, I assume, is like if you start having other classes of things in here other than icons. But I think that's really important, right? We've
Yes.
talked about that. I've talked about it in other sessions because being able to get back to that idea is probably how you can enrich this, update it, know exactly kind of what's in here.
Yes, and we do store a couple other things in Algolia. One is our categories.
Mm.
So um, the I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Okay, so uh, um, Rob, do you want to talk about how we get the data in Algolia?
Yeah, if you can pop up that, we're going to switch just real quick to some Elixir code because
Sure.
this is something that, so Chuck mentioned this in kind of a meeting that we were doing to prepare for this live coding thing. And he said, how do you guys get the data in there? So I wanted to just quickly kind of go over this because there's an Algolia API for Elixir, and we're using that right here, and it's just super easy to use. So we have this function, and it's this create function. And the first thing that we do is, lines 21 through 34, we're grabbing the data. So these are all the icons, all the categories, and there's another object here that it relates to backwards compatibility. We call them shims. So we're grabbing all that stuff, and we create a temporary index. And the reason we do that, and it's really neat how you can do this with Algolia, because this indexing is an instant. It takes a few seconds. So we don't want to have a broken production index. So what we're doing here is we create a temporary index kind of alongside the production version. And then if you can scroll down a little bit, let's put 36 at the top of the page, if you will, sir. Okay. So on 59, we do this move. So we're taking that temporary index and we're moving it to production. So that little move thing right there just instantly switches things over. So we can re-index as often as we need to when categories change or anything like that. Some fun things here. We've got on line 51, there's a save. And all that save is doing, it's taking this, basically it's a plain object. And it's the thing that Ed just showed us that ended up in Algolia. And if you can just run down real quick to that function, Ed, that actual save function. It's just calling Algolia save object. So we've got the index it's going to, the object, which is that plain, it's all the data, and then that ID that we created. So super easy to use. We can also integrate with the settings and change those because we've tuned the settings specifically to what we're trying to do, the way that things sort, all those good features that Algolia provides. All this happens in this one file here, and that's how we get that data in.
That's cool. So you're not for this purposes of this, we're not really taking advantage of any of like the incremental updates or anything like that. Essentially, what you can do is you have a source of truth, and you're sort of grabbing everything and doing a full refresh as a temporary index and sliding it into place, which I think definitely makes sense for the type of content you have. It's not like you have a lot of posts or threads or comments or things that are really dynamic like that.
Nope. We have releases every few months, and once it's released, it doesn't change. So we typically do this indexing thing about once every month or two.
Right. And I love the automation for the index settings too. I think that's incredibly important. I'm curious, how are you defining those settings? Do you have like, are you taking a snapshot of the JSON of the existing settings, or do you have sort of a way that you define that?
Yeah, it's pretty much a plain object
Mhm.
in the Elixir code. So
Mm,
you can think of it as like JSON or just a plain old object.
right.
And we've so what we've done is we'll play with the settings in the Algolia UI and figure out, okay, this is what we want. And then once we get them set just like we need to, then we actually codify and put them into the Elixir code so that it's repeatable and automated next time.
That's cool. I think, there's kind of a give and take that happens with Algolia because we have a lot of e-commerce players that essentially they like the ability to go into the dashboard and tweak rankings and things like that, right? Because they're trying to sell different things. And so kind of having that direct access to the dashboard is seen as a real positive. But as a developer myself, I'm always kind of wary of folks going into the dashboard and not really understanding what's changed and how. And I love to see like automation, sort of a definition of settings and sort of it getting pushed through a pipeline. So I'm always intrigued to kind of see this type of way of sort of handling the index settings. That's cool. That's cool. Now, out of curiosity, if I know we're going to be talking mostly about the Vue code, but I saw some things in your index that I just have to ask about tangentially. We can breeze over them if you want, because I see that you have some suffix values in there, right? And
Mhm.
Algolia, obviously, by default, is sort of prefix-based matching. That's our bread and butter. But I know that folks do have sort of this desire to kind of get that reverse suffix-based matching as well. And I'm curious, like, how did you come to this pattern? Is this something that's been around forever? Is this something that you sort of had to evolve?
Yeah, this was probably a desperation thing that you're seeing.
Okay, fair enough.
So we were trying to get a specific search behavior, and for some reason we couldn't figure it out. And I think it was partial partial matches.
Mm,
So if you searched for, yeah, I wish I could remember exactly how it got in here, but
that's
it
fine.
was, yeah, it was something we were trying to work around, and there could very likely be a setting or something that we missed in
Yeah.
Algolia, but these name suffixes magically unlocked matching like we were trying to get.
Yeah.
It's a pattern I've seen before. I was just mostly curious because, like, with your sort of, defined codified settings, do you have an environment where you can go and sort of play with, changing settings within the configuration and things like that? Do you have a sandbox or something like that?
Yeah, we absolutely do. We're pretty simple here. We have a production where everything runs on, and then we have one staging environment.
Mm,
Um, we That's worked really well for us for a long time. So we will go in and we will break and hack and mess with staging. Um, yeah, and then once we get it right, we'll let it go to production.
awesome.
Also, as part of that Elixir code that Rob wrote, we have the ability to create indexes or yeah,
Mhm.
for staging and for development. So sometimes we play around with things. We create one for development. I point my local at that one, test, see how all the stuff is working. If it's working good, then we'll push it to staging and do some more testing.
Cool. I think I love this operationalization. I'm a nerd about this kind of stuff, so that's why I kind of had to ask a few questions. But I think maybe it might be time to jump over to the front end, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So um, one of the things that I sort of started to hint at before was having those not only the icons in there, but also the categories and stuff. Um, so the modal, when you click on an icon on the site, we are actually, all of this is driven with Algolia data as well, other than our assets. Um, but uh, this pulls that same record. We just hand it off to the modal, and it gets loaded here, showing all of the the name and categories and version numbers, all that good stuff. And then it allows you to jump to the different versions icon. There is also because of that, there's a second version of this for SEO purposes and such, where we have a full blown page
Oh,
here
cool.
that is different than our search. It uses a different view template and everything, but we're still driving that off of Algolia data. And I wanted to show that real quick here. So we have our icon search,
Mhm.
which we're just using all of the view components that Algolia provides. Um, the one thing, so we have this facet filters here. We'll jump down to where that's defined and see for the search, we're only saying we want the type to be icon.
Mm,
That's limiting it to just be those, to just return icons and not give us any categories or anything. And then when we come over here to our icon landing page, we have something very similar where we have facet filters again. Um, and down below, we actually are setting, so being that we only want the one icon, we add a number of other things on here. So we only get back one record. Uh, um, and this is using, uh, so Algolia's search thing. This is an or basically, if you have all these
the
listed.
commas, yeah.
Yeah. So brands is a special case, but because this is an or, it works really well. If you come to, the basically, I'm creating this object ID, which would be like I colon the style colon the icon name, um, or it also works for aliases too. So we have some icons that have kind of a almost like a secondary name. Sometimes it's when we switch versions, icons get renamed and such. So this is one way that we do that, where we can use the data from Algolia to limit it down to one record. And then we have a similar thing on our category pages. So you can look, we have a bunch of categories here. When we pulled a specific category, we do that exact same thing, where once again have the facet filters, and let's go down to, and we're just limiting it to a particular category.
That's cool. Cool. And then when you were sort of toggling between the different looks, right, the thin versus the bolder look, is that all just sort of an array of image URLs within the record itself that you're kind of navigating between? Or are those separate records?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, it doesn't actually have to go get another record. We know that the difference here is basically some different CSS classes, right? So we're swapping some classes and things, so it knows to go get that one. Yep.
Got it. Okay, cool. Excellent. I love like, it's a pattern we see a lot, again, on the e-commerce side, where you sort of are driving your category pages as well, but it works really well for you. And I love the fact that like you've got this really nice visual language for showing sort of like all the different filters that are essentially applied at any given time. Like, I'm obviously doing a lot of hobby work with using FontAwesome, so I do have that free lightning bolt turned on quite often. But like you get a very nice visual cue that you've got free on, and which sort of class of icons that you're in. Like I love the way, and each of those I assume is kind of using one of those Vue components that essentially is triggering a facet filter on the back end. Is that true?
Yes, that is correct. So
Yeah.
so we have a style facet, and there's one for this featured section, and then the categories. And I did want to talk a little bit about those because we have, so take our style facets, for instance. This is not using the out of the box Algolia component for a facet list, but we use the create widget mixin and the connectors. So we're kind of doing some of our own things. Some of it is because the designers wanted a little bit more control over the look and feel here. And then the other part of that is we have a specific order that we would like those styles to show up in. This has a lot to do with the order of release of those things. So we're kind of playing around with some of the stuff here, sorting those facets so they appear in the way that we want them to.
Oh, cool. Yeah, and so for folks that haven't used it before, connectors are kind of a nice way that in each of our different sort of front-end packages, React, Vue, et cetera, essentially you're still using Instant Search, although the state information is still Instant Search, but it allows you to kind of completely override the visual side of it and then connect those two pieces together so that when someone interacts with your front-end UI element, it's also reflected in the state of the actual underlying, we call them widget, within the Instant Search library as well. So I love how you've done it. I love how you've got like this kind of clean, visual, consistent UI, particularly for like turning on those different filters. So I wanted to call that out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love the fact that you guys added these connectors in here. It makes it so much. It's so nice that we can kind of dig in a little bit and go beyond just those components. The components are great, but sometimes there's just some special cases of things that you want to cover, which the category facets is another one. So looking here at the list of categories, we have this one of our icons listed out next to it, and the count. So the way we do that, again, we are using one of those connectors with a refinement list, and we have a couple of files here that we're loading, one for our version 6 and one for version 5, and that file contains which icon we're using and a description for that category that we use on the category landing page. So then once, you know, it's down here somewhere, when, yeah, so when we pull that icon and the label off of it out of that file, as those facets are being loaded.
Cool.
That way, Algolia is still telling us which facets, which categories should show based on, you know, search results and stuff. If you search for, you know, like car or something like that, then only certain categories need to show up.
Right.
So it's still all ran through Algolia, but we're able to like kind of tap in and do some extra nice UI kind of things with that.
Yeah, yeah. So you get to pull in sort of your icons, but then you also get sort of the record counts and things like that for each facet from our side of things, and you can consolidate those too. So that makes it super easy to do things like for animals, like for instance, it's the year of the rabbit now. If you wanted to switch it over and have it be the rabbit be the default, you could very easily do that on your side, and then not have to tie into a bunch of logic on our side to kind of get the facet counts and things like that.
Absolutely.
Very cool. I love it. Was there something else I was going to say? Oh, I think it was the rabbit thing. I immediately thought of the rabbit thing when I saw the animals there. Yeah, and I love the fact that you have so there's a nice visual language to kind of show what's selected. You've got the ability to kind of clear out. Oh, I remember the other thing I was going to say is like also kind of those connectors and that ability to tap into that state. That's going to become, I'm assuming it's going to become very kind of important when we talk about routing later, just to foreshadow a little bit. But I know we're talking about the UI right now, but I think that's kind of an important point to make as well.
Yep. So again, we did the same kind of thing with this reset button. So we have let's see, the clear widget, where this is a much simpler example of using those connectors and just being able to just tap in here and grab the state and refine it down to nothing, so that, you know, the designers can have their look and feel on that button, have absolute control over it, and we still can, you know, tie all that functionality back into Algolia.
And Ed, one of the main reasons we did that is because if there wasn't a facet selected, we actually didn't want to show a reset. So
Yeah,
that's what our logic does, is it kind of looks, yeah, so then it's gone there.
Oh, nice.
You don't have anything selected. So that was just one of those enhancements. We're like, okay, yeah, we can do that.
That's
Just
very
reach for
clever.
that connector. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing to reset, so why show the button? That's very cool. And I love, I mean, going back to that clear widget, I think like this is very useful to me, thinking about like the Vue way of doing things, because this is a nice encapsulated sort of, I can see like the template very well. I can see your scripting. I'm assuming there's probably style down there towards the bottom that I'm not seeing right now, but no, not on this one. Okay.
yeah. No, we keep all of our style in in CSS files that get
Okay.
imported in and stuff like
Okay,
that.
got
So
it. But this is, I mean, super clear. It's easy to see what's going on, and I can. This really helps me see the appeal of sort of doing this in Vue, and kind of nice encapsulation here. Now, where's the piece where? So, where's the logic to hide it or show it?
so actually, this is
That's
it
it
right
there.
here.
Okay.
So
Okay.
whether it has refinements and has a search query, and the search query one is based on, this is again tying back into that widget so that we can pull off the state, the instance. So you do helper state query, and it checks to see if there is an actual value there or not. And that's pretty much it.
Very cool. Yeah, that helper. So that you can see that helper state. Basically, that lets you tap into essentially all of. I believe that's good. That allows you to see right directly into like how the UI is set right now, right? Which boxes are checked, which refinements are in place. Gives you direct access to all of that very easily, which is
Yes.
so great here because you can use it for making logical decisions as opposed to just like, you know, reflecting back and forth interactions with the user. I think that's very clever.
Yeah, and the other great thing about it is because passing props through, Vue works a lot like React does as far as the direction of data should always go down and events should go up. And if we had some controlling view component that then passed down everything, that would be really annoying. So being able to access this in kind of a global way, just because we've connected to the connector, that makes the code a lot cleaner. We don't have a lot of boilerplate trying to pass props down.
Mm. Yeah, no, I was definitely like, I was loving the what is it, the V model? Is that the thing that lets you kind of connect things back and forth two ways?
Oh yeah. So if you have like an input box and
Yeah.
someone changes it, um, instead of having to fill in the value, listen for the event, and then write all the code that makes that happen, you can just use a shortcut, say V model, and then you point it at a particular piece of data. And with Vue, we don't have one in here, but you basically define the component and then you have a data section, and you can put whatever you want to in there,
Right.
text, numbers, anything. And that's like the local state for that component. So you can modify that, and that V model makes it super easy just to say, when this input box changes, this value in the component changes.
Basically, this is sort of that taking up a few levels of abstraction. So now you've got these sort of more complex controls on your page. You're getting this two-way dialogue back and forth between them, the backend state, and what you want
Right.
to do
Yeah.
on your side.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I think, does this one have an emit at the bottom too? Yeah, I think it
I believe
might.
it does. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. So this emit, then that's event passing in view. So we're essentially saying whatever the parent is of this clear widget, because it's like way down in the page hierarchy. But we're sending that event back up and saying, hey, the clear button was just pressed.
Right on. And I'm seeing in chat, looks like we had a little technical glitch. So folks have been trying to chat with us over in chat. I apologize. It seems like there's a little bit of an issue. We weren't ignoring you, we promise. But you're welcome to chat with us now, and you're welcome to drop into the Q&A as well. Just wanted
I
to
thought
kind
we
of
were
clear
just
that up
really
there.
boring.
I know, no one was talking to us. I thought we were asking good questions. I was like,
It's good
really? No one
stuff.
likes Elixir? Really? All right, there we go. Hey, Dave, welcome. So now we're starting to get some folks chatting in. So yeah, we're glad to interact with you. We really weren't ignoring you. We just had a little bit of a technical hiccup. So, but while you're kind of asking your questions or telling us where you're from, let's continue on forward. I think there's some other things you wanted to show me, right?
Yeah. We can start getting into the router and the routing stuff that we have.
Oh yeah. Did you want to talk about no results first, though? I think, was that one of the
Oh yeah,
things?
sure. Yeah.
So cool.
That is very similar to the reset button situation,
Okay.
where basically we're using, again, one of the connectors, and this one is a special case where if you get to a search results that return where you have 0 icons coming back, we just wanted to be able to show an icon and give you a quick button to click to clear all of it out so you can get back to
Smart.
looking at icons. And so it is another place where that only needs to appear at certain times. So we didn't want to have that button hanging out around any place. So we just grabbed that connector and it, although its logic, there is no logic of whether it shows or hides here. It is actually based in one of the other views that basically says, oh, we didn't find anything, so show this.
Right.
Yeah,
And are you
it
do?
might.
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry,
Doc.
Chuck, talking over you. It might make sense to show this one, Ed, because I think this was a case, and the reason I thought this one is interesting is because there's not really I don't think there's an Algolia pattern for this, where there's, you get 0 results and then we want you to be able to do something with it. But we got kind of cheeky with it, and let's see if we can get to a 0 state here.
Yeah, I was, yep, there you go.
Look at that.
So we have a number of things here, right? I search for dog. I have the accessibility category selected. I had brands icon selected, sharp and free. And so you have no icons coming back because that combination just doesn't exist. So
Right.
clicking this button will clear them out.
That's really cool.
So,
Yeah, we have that. So in our autocomplete libraries, we kind of have this concept of a no results where you can sort of build out a template around it. But I love to see someone who's kind of like, really being thoughtful about using it. I love that you kind of have that ability to clear results. Another thing that we've seen other customers use too is like if you've got any mechanism that you're using for tracking clicks or looking at most popular icons, perhaps suggesting a few popular things there. Obviously, again, you see that a lot more in e-commerce where you're just trying to get them to buy something, right? Here, you're really trying to guide them a little bit more. So I can imagine that it would be a little harder to kind of be like, this is what we think you wanted. But I love to see like you guiding them and sort of saying like, this isn't a dead end. It's very easy to get back to what you're trying to accomplish.
All right.
Cool.
You guys ready to talk about the routing stuff?
This,
Yeah,
I'm really
let's jump
fascinated
in.
about this. Yeah.
Okay. So as you can see, when I select some of the different facets and things up here in the URL, I know that's a little hard to see. We have a number of things. And one of the things that our founders like us to do is try to create clean URLs. So we try to name things where they're more or less predictable. So you could, if you wanted to, you could come up here and you could like add your own, kind of hack the URL. So we ended up using, so the Algolia, I think actually, let's look here real quick. So we have this as part of setting up the Algolia components, you can pass in some stuff to the routing. And there's this concept of the state mapping so that you tell the Algolia components what you're calling those query string values. And because, like I said, we like those things to be clean, we have this whole file that makes it so we can determine which what those things are named and make those URLs nice and clean. So there's basically you have a back and forth. So state to route, and then down below this route to state. And this is another place that when we first started, I had no idea that Algolia could do this, and it wasn't until we got much later into the project where I realized, oh, we need to clean these URLs up, and I had to dive into this and stuff. But it's handy and it's pretty straightforward. So we have this one on the route to state. We have a difference between our version 5 and our version 6. So some logic there, but basically all we have to do is just grab those things and return them in a certain way so that it knows what to do with them.
Very cool. Now, so this is again me being a little bit ignorant of the Vue ecosystem. Does Vue itself have routing, or is that more of a Nuxt thing? Like, are you using, do you have routing that you're using other places outside of search, or is it really like because the search is such a large piece of this with the category pages and stuff that really this Algolia routing is kind of the crux of it?
Well, it
Yeah,
actually,
go ahead, Rob.
yeah, I was going to say, Algolia does have its own routing.
Mhm.
And at first we were like, yay, it's got its own routing. But with Vue, we're also using another side library called ViewRouter.
Mhm.
And it handles all of the HTML5 push state stuff and manipulation of the history. And it's really, it's a great thing, but it doesn't out of the box integrate well. We didn't find a way until much later to hook it up with Algolia.
Mhm.
So we actually have, and we'll go over this too, kind of the step where we figured out, oh, we kind of don't want Algolia to be in charge of the routing. We want ViewRouter to still handle that because we were doing a lot of stuff with ViewRouter and we kind of needed that to work. So there's another file we'll show here in just a second that we glue the two together. And it's not
Got it.
anything that ViewRouter came up with. You guys have a pattern for it. It's documented. We just had to kind of hook in, and we can kind of talk over why it's necessary because that's not immediately apparent. You're like, well, why is that? Why is it important? But yeah, we can get
Yeah,
into that.
I didn't mean to get ahead of us, but that's the thing that I think a lot of developers struggle with is when they've got a framework router and then you've got the Algolia routing on top of it and kind of how they fit together. But let's focus on this for now then. So obviously, so we've got this state translation. You've got this ability to translate back and forth between sort of what's in the query and what's in that UI state that we're seeing within that helper. And did you have to do some massaging there? Like I see like you've got a V5 and a V6, so obviously there's some slight differences or there's some sort of opinionated mapping that's going on here. Is there anything sort of really interesting here around the mapping that you wanted to point out?
Um,
It looks like most of it, you're really just passing objects back and forth though.
yeah, I think that's most of it. I think there was a so this part up here was a little tricky until we figured things out at first because you have to like um, as those things come in, you have to identify, like if it's a refinement list, we're doing some things differently here because we have to encode those things and join them together with commas. So like when you have multiple uh, of these things together, so we end up with a list of them instead of, you can't have multiple S's in the query string, et cetera.
Right.
Um, so there was a little bit tricky stuff going on here, but overall, yeah, it was uh,
I see some like renaming
workflow.
of some booleans to make them a little easier to read. And
Yep.
then down towards the bottom, I think I saw some like obviously you always got to get clever with delimiters when you're talking about query strings. So I think I see a little bit of that going on down there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think line 58 there, if I remember correctly, we had a bug where, and I don't remember exactly how the bug was triggered, multiple equal signs maybe, or an unencoded equal sign, but it would
Yeah.
it freaked our router out, and we had to put that in place, that replace right there, 58 through 60, to kind of get around that encoding bug.
And so obviously you have a lot of different types of refinements. You have your categories, you've got the overlays like free, you've got the query string itself, obviously, and then a lot of the sort of the things down the side. Is every single one of those reflected in your URL? So can you get like a full capture of the state that you left things in?
Yes.
I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
That's really
And that again, that's part of not only having clean URLs, but having bookmarkable URLs,
mhm,
right? So if you find you have like, oh, I found I want to use these icons, and you can copy this URL and send it to your designer or whoever and say, these are the icons I want to use right here.
right, right.
And they click that URL and they'll get exactly the same thing.
Now, speak to me a little bit. You talked earlier about you've got slightly different views for the search pop-up versus the icon sort of landing page.
Mhm.
How is that reflected in the URLs? Because honestly, I wasn't looking at the routing in the URLs earlier.
So yeah, we do some tricky little things here. When you click on one, we actually switch this URL to the icon landing page URL.
Oh, cool.
Um, so that if you were like, you want to share this particular icon, when you copy and paste that, you will get back to this icon. But, and I'll do it now, we'll just hit enter there. You'll end up on that icon's landing page
Got
instead
it.
of in the search.
Okay, that's very clever. Because I know you were saying that slightly different views, but the underlying state is the same. So I didn't catch the fact that you're actually swapping out the URL. I like that. That's really cool.
Yep. And then on this landing page, it allows us to do some extra things. So we have this icons and actions section, which, and then we also, this is driven by Algolia down here. This is more icons like alarm clock. And we're
Ooh,
actually, this has it's a different component I didn't show off, but I am passing in, basically, I have the query. So, uh, so we get some icons that are, similar, um,
right, right.
but
I'm
still
I'm
enough to kind of show off. So.
I'm dying to bring up our recommend product and some of the model based stuff that we can do with click information and conversion information. I'm guessing this is probably something a little more homegrown.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. But I think that's an incredible pattern to follow is to help, this is what we talk about when we talk about discovery, right? Is like people think they know what they want, but maybe they're that close and not that close. And so to give them a little bit more range and give them these options at the bottom, I think it's fantastic, regardless of how they're kind of being put in. And you have deep knowledge about these icons. So it makes it a lot easier for you to make these types of recommendations, I'm sure, without needing to use like a machine learning model. This is really cool.
All right. Want to jump into the rest of the routing stuff here,
Yeah,
Rob?
let's.
Yeah. This is kind of our last stop on the tour. So, like I was talking before, we came to this point where Algolia has its own routing. We're also using Vue routing in the rest of the site. So the entire site is pretty much a single page application with push state and HTML5 routing. So we changed the URL, but then behind the scenes, we're loading JavaScript, doing fetch calls to the backend server. Very few full page loads. So we were having a lot of trouble, especially with that thing we just looked at where the icon Madole came up, but that page is also a full page. If you do a refresh or the search engine spiders it, had a lot of trouble with that. Our back button wasn't working correctly. And we realized that one of the key things is that ViewRouter has no concept just out of the box that anything is happening in Algolia. So Algolia takes over and it's routing fine. The search works great, but ViewRouter has no idea what's going on. So when you hit back and ViewRouter takes over, it's sending you way back in the history. So the solution was, and again, this is documented on Algolia, we eventually found this, is we wrote this just little piece, and these are all hooks. So what we're doing, line 38, line 43, 50, these are all things that Algolia wants. These are Algolia hooks. So it's letting you do something else and take over that function. So Algolia is going, okay, if I'm not going to do the read on the query string, I want you to tell me what the query string is. So then we, line 38, we reach, okay, well, we've got a ViewRouter. So I'm just going to give you that query. And then as Algolia wants to change the URL, it calls write, giving the route state. And instead of Algolia doing it, we're letting the ViewRouter do it. And that's what you see with this $router, all of those instances there. That's the actual ViewRouter.
Got it.
So by doing this, we delegate routing to ViewRouter. Algolia doesn't do any of it anymore. And everything starts to work really nicely at that point. So what's great about this, the way that it was architected, is these are all just hooks. So if you need to come in here, maybe you're not using ViewRouter, maybe you're using some other thing, maybe homegrown or some other thing. It's all really easy. And we end up with this really small module that completely fixed the issue we were having with history and being able to read the current query or the current where we were at in search through ViewRouter.
Nice. So essentially you're delegating out the routing to ViewRouter, but then once a new route is established, you have the ability to sort of parse out that state information and push it down to the Algolia side of things.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can even trigger a routing change using ViewRouter, and Algolia will pick it up.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. So I'm seeing, so we've got an on update. We've got a dispose, is like a cleanup, I assume. There's not really a lot in here.
A lot in there. And these, to be quite honest, the on update and the dispose, I mean, the dispose is fairly self-explanatory. That's it's cleaning up. But this on update, it's part of the Algolia documentation. And I'm assuming this is where a lot of the magic happens. We pretty much copied this from the example, and I honestly can't tell you exactly how it works.
Yeah. I've always find this piece interesting. That was actually like a big part of, again, I mentioned earlier, we have an ambassador named Jacob who's kind of big, and he spends a lot of time in the Vue community, and he wrote a lot of code that has now sort of been adopted by the community on the Nux side, but a lot of it has to do with sort of managing sort of the interplay between the different routers, particularly if you're starting to do, I think, you're doing a lot of client side, but, especially if you start getting into like SSR, right? And you're trying to figure out what's changing on the client, what's changing up on the server. It can get a little complicated, but this is nice and clean. I'm really impressed with how easily this integrates on the Vue side. Frankly, this is, again, this is kind of the first time I've really delved into it with pure Vue, and it's nice to see how easy this is.
Yeah, and this is a production website serving millions of searches and requests per month, and it's not it works great.
That's awesome. I've really gotten a lot of questions. Again, this kind of, you got one more opportunity here. If you've got something you want to ask, throw it in the Q&A. I'm keeping an eye on that right now. Drop it in chat and Julie can put it over as well. But I think, my personal question would be, what next, right? Because, obviously as a person who sort of lives and breathes Algolia, I see a lot of opportunities to use some additional functionality here. I see things like, Edward, where you were kind of manually reordering some of the facet values to sort of be to your liking, and it immediately makes me think about like re-ranking and some of the things that we sort of have started bringing in, where we can sort of have those values, the ordering of those values reflected on how people are coming through your site. And I mentioned like recommendations. I see things like I see opportunities for things like maybe query suggestions, or the ability to sort of give people some ideas right up front, beyond just the categories. And I'm talking a lot, but I'm just curious, like where is your brain right now as far as like where it could go? I think this is great UI, but obviously there's always opportunities to improve.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Ed. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I know one of the places, kind of this first page when you hit the icons, we've done like a custom ranking on these,
Mm,
based on kind of our intuition and things that we think are the most popular. And then we've been trying to gather the data and push that to Algolia about which icons are actually popular. I know that's one area of the site that we have talked about numerous times, of changing the way this ranking works so that it is actually ranked based on number of searches and the actual popularity of the icon.
very cool. Yeah, and I think that's kind of where a lot of folks are going now, is kind of moving from this sort of one-way engagement to sort of making the search experience be a little bit more of a dialogue, right? Where you're sort of watching how your users are interacting with the site and kind of reflecting that in what you send back to them. Not necessarily personalized, but kind of an aggregate, right? Generally speaking, we have an idea of what you're looking for based on what others have looked for in the past. I think that's a great approach to go to. Um, as far as so we've talked a lot about the search. So is there anything else you want to talk about, sort of like as a developer using FontAwesome? What would be, once I found the icons I want? Do you want to talk anything a little bit more about sort of how it feels after that, the developer experience of actually taking these icons and using them in their site?
Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I was busy answering a question instead of paying
Oh.
attention to Chuck. So maybe you
Okay.
can repeat it for me.
Oh, sure, no problem. I was just saying that, we've been focusing a lot on search. Obviously, that's my obsession. But I wanted to know if you wanted to take any time to kind of talk about, obviously developers are using your site as well. What is the experience like for them beyond, like once they found the icons they want? What's the next step for them within your site?
Yeah, it's that start using button. So we've got once you find that icon, there are tons of ways to integrate. We support a lot of the popular JS frameworks: React, Vue, Ember, Angular. We have documentation here for Nuxt and Next. Yeah, all that down there. So WordPress integration, we've got our official plugin that we support, and just lots of different ways. So you find that icon, you figure out what project or how you're kind of using it, because everyone has a slightly different setup,
Mm,
So once you do that, you can jump in, see some examples and documentation on how to use it, and then hopefully get that in. We do have support. So some folks will run into problems, and we hate that. We've got support for our pro customers, so you can sign up, and along with pro also you get tons of more icons,
mm.
and we're always releasing new contents. We've got another release coming up here probably in the next few weeks of our next style for Sharp. So right now Sharp has just one style. We're about to release the second one and get that out there.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I love that. I love the way you sort of have these library specific ways of sort of engaging, these ways to sort of select all your icons, bundle them up so that you're not ones, because that's what I'm guilty of is I'll go grab one, I'll grab another. So I think there's some clever things that developers can do to sort of work with your utility to sort of be more thoughtful about how you add icons in. Also, I think at this point we can go ahead and let's just jump to a dialogue, Edward. You can stop sharing your screen now if you'd like.
Okay.
There was one question in the Q&A, and Rob, I saw you. To your point, you were answering it there, but let's go ahead and answer it live too, just for folks that maybe aren't in the Q&A. It was around, we were talking about popularity of icons, and we had someone who was a long-term since V4 user of FontAwesome that was just curious how you sort of track the popularity of those icons and which ones are most popular. You want to maybe address that here as well?
Sure. With that can be tricky because on one hand, we've got great data from Algolia, so we can see what people are searching for. And that is one kind of source of data we could say, like, these are popular because people are searching for them.
Mhm.
That doesn't necessarily mean people are using them. So one thing that we do have, and we didn't show the product, but one of our kind of our flagship, we call it Kits, and it's got a CDN service with it. So you don't have to worry about hosting it yourself. You don't have to install it anywhere. You can just you throw a tag into your page, and then you can just use Kits. It serves from our servers. The great thing about that is we get real data from those servers about the exact icons that are being used. So we can do a count of how many people are using the solid users icon, the login, the little search magnifying glass. All that stuff comes in. So we can collect that. And it's not perfect yet. We have some additional things we're kind of working on in the future, but for the most part, that's where that comes from.
That's cool. And have you oh, I think we're gonna have to wrap it up here. I was gonna ask one more question around around the bundles, but we'll leave that for another day. But I want to thank you both. I want to thank you, Rob. I want to thank you, Edward, for sharing your code and for sharing a little bit about FontAwesome. Again, you got a lot of fans over here on the Algolia side of the fence. And check out the site and definitely take advantage of it. So we'll be back again in about a month in February. Be looking for an email with our next topic. And thank you all for coming and joining our live coding session today. I'm surprised no one asked, is this recorded? It was recorded. You'll get the URL in an email after this. So take care and thanks again.